Hello and welcome to how to play the Lizardmen in 2021. Now, before you watch this video, you should probably go back and watch my actual Lizardmen guide that covers everything I'm not going to cover here. The only things I'm going to cover in this video are everything that's been added since then, or anything that's been changed or removed. I'm going to be covering every single thing that's added in this video, so if it feels like I'm jumping around a lot, it's probably because I am. Now, without further ado, let's go first into the things that have changed. Now, for the Lizardmen, the thing that's changed is relatively small. As far as I could tell, there was only one thing that was different. Mazdamundi lost his +1 to slan mage capacity and gained a minus 50% miscast chance, 50 XP per turn, and 40 wins of magic reserve for his army. Other than that, everyone has remained pretty much the same. Now for the new factions. First of all, we have the Spirits of the Jungle, which is led by Nakai. Now, Nakai is a Horde faction, but he isn't like your average Horde faction. His army is the only one in the faction that can be upgraded like your regular Horde. All other armies simply use global recruitment to get their units from him. Nakai doesn't just raise or sack settlements that he takes either. He instead gives them to a vassal faction and dedicates them to one of 3 options for all sorts of rewards. In my personal opinion, a Horde faction is still a Horde faction no matter how much you change it, and a turd is still a turd no matter how much you change it, so I'm not the biggest fan of this. Other than that, the only other thing that he brings to the faction is +3 recruit rank for Kroxgor Ancients. As for his personal army, he adds +5 melee attack and minus 10% recruitment cost for Kroxgor and Sacred Kroxgor units, and starts with a Sacred Kroxgor and Kroxgor units in his army. His starting location in Mortal Empires is Albion, for some reason. As for his expansion options, you can try and secure Albion, but it won't be easy, especially since Rakaf got added, and honestly, no matter which way you go, it's going to suck. Maybe you stick to the Dark Elves once finishing off Rakaf and head to the northeast. I really don't understand why he doesn't start in Lustria, since, you know, he is kind of going against Marcus Wolfart, who does start in Lustria, but I digress. As for climate preferences, since he's a Horde faction, he obviously doesn't have any. In battle, he's armoured and deals massive amounts of armour-piercing damage. He's also aquatic, so moves faster and performs better in water, and of course has predatory sensors, so can detect when there are enemy units hidden nearby. He's a great bulldozer of an enemy lord that can make holes in the enemy front lines, both with his giant hammer and with his hilarious rolling attacks. He has no mounts or spells, but does have the abilities Miasma of Despair and Primal Roar. When leveling him, you want to start with the blue tree and get Root Marcher and Spawn of Itza for Horde growth, and then honestly whatever to get to Draftsmaster and of course Lightning Strike. Geomantic Sustenance for reduced upkeep of the expensive roster, and Gifts of the Jungle for replenishment, which is never not strong. Finally, Renowned and Feared for all sorts of buffs. The Legendary Warrior tree is its own unique tree and has some neat combat buffs for him and the army, and the top row of course always has some great buffs, with resistances and increases to hit points. Finally, you want to go into the red tree to buff your key units as much as possible. As for his missions, he has 3 of them. The Golden Tributes is a 3-way battle of 3 lizard armies versus 3 armies of Skaven and Vampire Coast. You must beat your own army and support your allies to fight off the rats. It's fairly easy to dismiss your first army, and then you'll have to haul ass across the map to assist your friends. The item gained is a great talisman that provides defensive buffs and perfect vigor to all nearby units. The Orgum Shard is versus a fairly large mid-game Chaos army, and they also get reinforcements in the form of a similar army. This one can be pretty tough, so make sure you're taking a decent mid to late game army. The item gained is a decent enchanted item that provides magic resistance, as well as some minor buffs for his army. Finally, he has the Battle for Itza. This is the final battle in the Vortex campaign versus Marcus Wolfart. This is one of my favourite quest battles in the game, as it really does feel like a spectacle. It's a massive clash of your endgame army versus the endgame army of Marcus, filled with his legendary hero team and all sorts of powerful Empire units. The other new faction to be added was Itza, which is led by Gorak. As for their faction effects, they gain the unique Rite of Resilience, which grants Unbreakable and a bunch of defensive buffs for Saurus, which catapults them into the stratosphere. You also start the campaign in control of Lord Croak, which is hilariously overpowered. You gain +3 recruit rank for Saurus Scar veterans, and a minus 20% upkeep for Sauruses. Gorak's personal army gains 5 melee attack when in own or friendly territory, and 20 physical resist when defending a siege. His starting units are a Skink Cohort, Saurus Warriors with Shields, and Saurus Spears with Shields. Their starting location is obviously Itza, and for their starting options, you want to secure your starting province and continue chasing Skrulk and finish him off. Take out Loki while you're at it, because he'll just stab you in the back if you don't, and then head north to take out the other hostile invaders such as the Vampire Coast, Marcus Wolfart, and some Norskans on the way to Mazdamundi. If the Dark Elves survive, they will likely come to attack you later in the game, so just make sure you defend that northern coast as much as you can. As for their climate preferences, they are very standard and exactly the same as all the other Lizardmen. Savannah, desert, and jungle are habitable. Temperate, mountain, magical forest, and temperate island are unpleasant, and wasteland, frozen, ocean, and chaotic wasteland are uninhabitable. In battle, Gorak is armoured and shielded and an absolute tank who can be incredibly difficult to take down. He deals good amounts of armor piercing damage and is of course a melee expert, so toss him into the front lines and just watch him go. He also has predatory sensors, so if there are any enemy units hidden nearby, he will sniff them out soon enough. He has no mounts or spells, but does have the abilities To the Death, Rock of Itza, and Stand Your Ground. When leveling him, you of course want to go into the blue tree and get Root Marcher, then anything to get the Draftsmaster and Lightning Strike, Geomantic Sustenance for reduced upkeep, Gifts to the Jungle for replenishment, and then Renowned and Feared. Pick a blessing that works well for your playstyle, and then Unrelenting Assault is his unique tree and full of all sorts of stupidly strong buffs. The top row of course has some great options for Resistances and Honored Elder, and then Red Tree for your key units, and might I recommend Saurus because that is kind of his thing. Gorak only has access to one mission, the Shield of Eons. It's the same as the Golden Tributes battle that Nakai has access to, but you just play as Gorak on the opposite side of the battlefield. The item gained is great for some defensive buffs, as well as an aura augment that increases defense even more for him and nearby units. Our other new lords are the Crocscore Ancients. This guy is kind of like a bit of a weaker Nakai. He's armoured and deals armour-piercing anti-infantry damage, and similar to Nakai, you just want to toss him into the front lines and watch him go. He does have quite a large hitbox however, so if he gets surrounded by high damage units, he can start to get into trouble, so make sure he's always backed up. He has no mounts or spells, but does have the abilities Monstrous Strength and Miasma of Despair. When leveling them, you want to go into the blue tree as usual. You want to get Root Marcher and then anything to get to Draftsmaster and Lightning Strike, Geomantic Sustenance for the upkeep, Gifts to the Jungle for replenishment, and then Renowned and Feared. Obdurate Till Death and all the other ones along that line are really great and unique to these guys, and the top row has some nice buffs as always. The red tree is of course always important for focusing on your key units, and Immortality is as useful as always. There are two new Slann Mage Priests, and since they are pretty much the same apart from the spells and the ability, I'll cover them as one. In battle, they are spellcasters and want to be used on the back lines, staying away from most of the actual combat. Neither of them have access to any mounts, and both have the abilities Arcane Conduit, Shield of the Old Ones, and Banishment. The Slann Mage of Fire has access to Law of Fire and the ability Kindle Flame, and the Slann Mage of Life has access to Law of Life and the ability Life Bloom. Of course, we're starting in the blue tree, going Root March and then anything to get to Draftsmaster and Lightning Strike, Geomantic Sustenance, Gifts of the Jungle, and Renowned and Feared as usual. Then you want to pick up any spells that you want, probably just all of them. Reserves of Eldritch Energy line is good for some magical buffs, and the top row has some good resistances. The red line for your key units, and of course, Immortality. Now finally, we come to the new units. First of all, we have the Razordon Hunting Pack. They're armoured and deal armour-piercing damage from both ranged and in melee, and are kind of a precursor to the Salamander Hunting Pack. Pretty much want to use them the exact same, get on the flanks of the enemy using their quick speed, and fire into the sides and backs of the enemy units. Want to focus fire on any armor to make the most of their armor piercing damage, and they have okay armor piercing melee but terrible melee stats and can go on rampage, so might not be the best idea versus anything that could even try to friend them. I would say taking about 4 of them, but again, I'd probably just replace them with Salamander Hunting Packs as soon as I could. Next up we have the Sacred Crocscore, which are armoured and deal massive amounts of armor piercing damage with their giant sacred boxing gloves. They pretty much perform the same as regular Crocscores and have better stats in many ways, including magical attacks and a buttload of weapon strength. You want to embed these guys in the melee lines and protect them from the majority of the enemy infantry. You do not want to let these guys get isolated by a load of anti-large damage, otherwise they'll get taken out pretty quickly. I would say taking 4 of these guys and replacing any Crocscores that you have would work pretty nicely. The Feral Dreadsaurian is a massive armoured monster and possibly the biggest single entity in the game. It has huge armor stats from its natural scales, huge armor piercing damage with a massive area of effect attacks, and it is just an absolute monster to toss into the middle of the enemy and watch it tear everything up. It is vulnerable to going on a rampage, but it really does belong in the middle of all the enemy units, so it's not so bad if it does. Just be sure to take out enemy ranged units, or this guy will get focus fired since you really can't miss it. I would say taking 2 of these guys would work very nicely in shredding the entire of the enemy front line. It also comes in another variation, the Dreadsaurian that isn't feral. It is very similar to the base unit, gains a little bit more HP and leadership, and no longer rampages, which is a nice touch. It also gains a team of skinks on its back that continually fire poison projectiles, likely for the majority of battle, and get constant value whenever this lad is in combat. Honestly, it's just better than the base unit in every single way, but is very, very expensive. Now we come to the Regiments of Renown, and as usual, I'll call out the unit, what they are a unit of, and the differences between them and the base unit. The Amaxan Barbs are a Razordon Hunting Pack, and have poison attacks in melee and ranged, plus 8 to their missile strength and missile resistance. The Cohort of Huatl are a Sacred Crocscores unit, and swap missile resist for physical resist, and gain armor sundering attacks. And finally, the Shredder of Lustra is a Dreadsaurian. It gains 42 missile strength, encourage, and the Dread Aversion attribute. Now, of course, it wouldn't be an update if I didn't update my army composition. Of course, I couldn't resist putting a couple of these new units into my new recommended composition for the endgame of the Lizardmen. So, starting off with the front line, I'm sticking with the 6 Temple Guard since they remain to be the best infantry in the Lizardmen roster. For my ranged units, I'm going for 2 Salamander Hunting Packs and 2 Ancient Salamanders. I'm pretty sure there's no change there. For my secondary front line, I'm going for 4 units of Sacred Croc Scores. These are definitely new units and are absolutely fantastic at smashing through the enemy front lines and just battering everything they have. I'm still sticking with my 2 Ancient Stegodon Engine of the Gods because that Engine of the Gods is fantastic and the Ancient Stegodons do great work. I'm also going with 2 of the brand new Dread Saurians because they're just massive, they look too cool, and I just could not resist having them in. Of course, I'm still leading my armies with a fighter and a caster. You can either go with a Slann Mage Priest and a Saurus Scout Veteran, or you can go with a Saurus Old Blood and a Skink Priest of Heavens if you want to get a 3rd Engine of the Gods, which is what I chose to do, but either works just as well. Now, to see how this composition forms in battle, I'll pass you over to Miles. Take it away. Thanks for that, Miles. I'm just going to do super speed this because it takes me a little bit of time to get into position. We are starting on, I believe this map is called the Plaque of Sotek, and we just need to advance on the enemy Empire army. Before we get into this battle. As you can see here, moving my Salamander units off to the side here so they can fire into the right flank of the enemy. The Temple Guard and the rest of the army are now moving up to face them centrally, taking quite a number of shots, but thankfully moving through those woods to avoid any massive amounts of damage. You can see the enemy Halberdiers, the Northern Mariners, and some Greatswords, and some Demigryph Knights rushing in to meet the Temple Guard. Not to worry, they have a bunch of armor, bunch of defense, bunch of melee stats. These guys are really, really good. And of course, the Dread Saurian backing them up is that's definitely going to give them a lot of assistance. A secondary unit of Temple Guard and a 3rd unit of Temple Guard now clashing with the enemy lines. We are well and truly getting into the melee of this battle. Some Sacred Croc Swords now assisting against those Demigryph Knights. They are going to melt them with their magical armor-piercing 120 weapon strength attacks. They surely stand no chance whatsoever. You can see on the right flank here that the Salamander Hunting Packs and the Ancient Salamanders are both assisting in taking on this large number of enemy Demigryph Knights. We have 1, 2, and 3 units there, including one that is Halberds. So if he gets into the Dread Saurian, I mean, it's not really going to matter. Thing's got 15,000 health, but they will do some pretty serious damage. You can now see that I'm getting quite a number of Engine of the Gods shots off. We've got this massive one that's coming into all this cavalry here. That is coming from my Spellcaster. We have one that's coming into all of these infantry units, including the Halberds and the Greatswords here. That is coming from my other Engine of the Gods. And my 3rd and final one is landing right on top of those Demigryph Knights and then moving into all of these Greatswords, along with a Comet of Cassandora into the back there, where the Saurus Old Blood Lord is fighting against the Huntsman General and a bunch of the enemy range units, including 2 Luminarchs of Hysh. Now, my Salamanders will get a little bit charged by the Demigryph Knights, but I managed to pull the regular hunting packs out and let one of the Ancient Salamanders keep him busy, and then the rest of these guys can shoot at them and get them off the battlefield as quickly as possible. These guys are a lot more tanky and better at fighting than these guys since they're just a single entity. So that is why I was doing that. You can see that we are easily winning the right-hand flank here. The Dread Saurian is just burning through everything the enemy can throw at it. And on the left-hand side, it is a similar story. The Demigryph Knights with Halberds over here are putting up a bit more of a fight, but they surely will fall to the Dread Saurian once he notices that they are there and starts taking big chunks out of them. My friendly lord is kind of chasing around this Luminarch of Hysh. He has a bonus versus large, so he's going to do very good damage against that, of course. Also backing up that bonus versus large with a bonus versus large of a massive 519 weapon strength. And of course, brand that cannon sword does surely help. A little bit of friendly fire onto the Dread Saurian here, but as I said, 15,000 health. It's going to take a lot more friendly fire than that if you want to run him off the battlefield. This guy's just tearing the ass up, getting rid of the Stir River Patrol and another one of those Luminarchs of Hysh, and I will try to bring him up here to get rid of the other enemy missile units, the Silver Bullets and Gundam's Sure Fires. I could have definitely probably moved these guys in a little bit earlier, but what can you do? And there you go. That was a speedy battle. In fact, the enemy is shattered due to army losses because we've just eliminated that front line so quickly, and so much my army is left. That's, they have 3 troops left, and we have 505, so the army losses were in fact inevitable. Those 1 troops, of course, are the Caribou Greatswords, which the Empire always likes to bring in these battles, which are of course unbreakable, so I'm just Control-A and right-clicking on them to get rid of them. And there we go. And fairly easy victory. As I said, I'm not perfect at these battles. I like to leave the mistakes in just because it lets you know that, you all know I'm not perfect, but it just shows you that how even when you make mistakes, you can still win the battle. So yes, I definitely could have probably moved these guys in a little bit sooner, got more ranged support on the right flank there, and of course, once we won that right flank, moved the units in and kind of collated them all into the middle, and definitely had something to chase these guys down. There is the one downside of this army that I'm very willing to admit is it is not the fastest. Sure, the Sacred Croc Scores and the Ancient Stegodons and the Dread Saurians are reasonably quick, but if there's something that's very fast and can fire whilst moving, like some handgunners, then they could very easily kite me. I'm really banking on the extremely high armor and the extremely high damage of my front line for this army composition. Anyway, let's get into the stats here. Of course, the Lord was targeting very high value target units, so the Lunak of Heish, the Lord, the heroes. So even though he only got 4 kills, he did get 2,500 damage value. Of course, 52 kills for the Skink Priest of Heaven's Out between the Comet of Cassandora, a couple of other casts, and the Engine of the Gods. Of course, the damage value isn't too high because he was mainly attacking infantry, but still 52 kills is not bad at all. As you can see, the infantry in a rare moment of actually getting a lot of the value, well, a lot of value relative to their general cost. So we have 21 kills there. They must have been fighting against some of the enemy cavalry because none of their infantry would have cost quite that much for 21 kills. Then we have 45 there, 21, 40, 28, and 29. So not too bad at all. Definitely very, very good for infantry, but of course they are very expensive. As for the Salamander hunting packs, as I said, I could have moved these guys in and got a lot more kills. Getting charged down by the enemy cavalry sure did slow me down and, you know, kind of offset my micro a little bit because I'm a little bit bad. But nevertheless, you know, 11 kills, 1,000 value each, not too shabby. The Sacred Croc scores the new additions to this army with 29, 59, 17, and 62 kills. None of them actually managed to pay for themselves, but again, they are all fighting this enemy infantry. If they'd managed to get into some of this cav, then those numbers could have been a lot higher. Of course, the Engine of the Gods Stegodons with plenty of kills between them, 64 and 85, which I believe, yes, that is correct, is our highest kill count on this battle. So 1,400 damage value there. That is, of course, from the massive Engine of the Gods cast, which, you know, if you've got them, you use them, and you use it in a big fat blob, and it just racks up a massive number of kills. For the 2 Dread Saurians, 73 and 45 kills, I don't think either of them paid for themselves because this unit is so goddamn expensive. The entire Lizardmen roster of good units are expensive, but these guys in particular, they are a serious chunk of change, but oh my, they're so much fun to watch in battle, and they get a lot of value. Quite a while back, about a year ago now, in fact, I posted a battle replay of me using one of these Dread Saurians, and it managed to win against insurmountable odds. It was truly incredible. So yes, I love these guys. And finally, wrapping up with the Ancient Salamanders. Again, not too many kills because, you know, my range units weren't doing too well. They got charged down, so they were forced to kind of, well, they weren't forced to, but I kind of forgot about them, and they kind of lie there not doing much. But yes, took the Empire out, you know, we got the victory. That's all that really matters nowadays, and you can definitely see how this army would work, and does work, in battle. So yes, that's all from me. Now back to Miles to close you out. Thanks for that, Miles, and thank you for watching this update of my Lizardmen guide. I'd like to take this time to thank all supporters of the channel, in particular Average Sized Andy, Nifty Norm, and Kobe Said So, for their fantastic support of the Unclean Ones tier. One more thank you for watching, and for now, I've been Colonel Damneders, and I will see you next turn.